Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. I appreciate it. I know that I don't think that there's any of us that grief hasn't touched. So the fact that you invited me to come here it's really, really special. It's an extremely poignant day for us because today, on November the 23rd of 2014, is when my daughter died. So today is her 11th anniversary. And so it kind of makes it a really, really special day for me to be talking to you. If anybody had ever told me in November or December of 2014 that I would have come to believe the things that I believe and to have experienced the things I've experienced, to know the things that I've come to know, I think I probably would have laughed back then. But this has been an enormous transformation for me. I believe that the universe prepared me for it. I believe that I was ready shortly after she died to learn new things. And I know that the universe prepared her probably for going home. She and I had a very, very close relationship. We rarely argued. We laughed all the time. We talked multiple times a day, from her walk to the subway in the morning to her walk back in the evening. And we rarely had bad words with each other. 2 nights before my daughter died, and the last time that I talked to her, I told her that we were watching something. We were both mutually watching it on television. And my daughter was 25 at the time. She'd be 36 today. And I mentioned to her that when she one day had children, that I wanted to be called Nana. And out of the clear blue, my daughter said to me, I think we both know that this body will not be having any children. And I think it's very cruel of you to say that. Took me back. I was really shocked by it. And I actually called her a drama queen. I said, where is all this drama coming from? And she said, I just don't want to talk about it. And I said, well, maybe we'll talk tomorrow. It seems like you're having a bad night. And other than a text, that was the last time I talked to her. On the back of my book, the question that I asked up on the top was, what if your biggest loss became your greatest teacher? And that is exactly what happened. Early on in my life, I was born and raised in a Roman Catholic family. There was absolutely no discussion, understanding of the afterlife. The farthest we ever got with anything like that was that when you died, you became an angel, you sat on a cloud, and you were going to do that for eternity. And I remember even being a young child thinking, that didn't make any sense to me. That made no sense, that we would come and we would have experiences here. I had grandparents who lived close to 100. My own father died in his early 50s. I couldn't understand, why would we come here and have experiences and then die and then do nothing or sit on a cloud or whatever it was. I always wanted to know more, even when I was young. I was very confused about it. But we just were never exposed to anything like that. So until I was about 9 years old, and I've told this story once before. I did not include this story in my book because I didn't have permission to do so. But when I was about 9 years old, and I was always a very voracious reader. I read the newspapers. I was 9 years old watching the news. I was really interested in those kinds of things. And I saw in our local newspaper that a tragedy had happened in our community, and 2 boys, a little bit older than me, 12 and 13 years old, were kidnapped on their way home from school. Several days later, they found the boys. They had been abused, murdered, mutilated. It was a horrible, horrible thing. And I just remember thinking, how does anyone even go on after such a thing? I didn't know these people. I knew where they lived. They had gone to our church. You know, we in northeastern Pennsylvania, but back then, most people were Roman Catholic. Church was very filled up on Sunday, but I didn't know exactly who these people were. But as the universe tends to work and as synchronicities happen, The following year, when I was 10, I was getting ready to receive confirmation, and Father McCann at my church paired me with a girl named Alice. And Alice's brother was one of the young boys that was murdered. And I had an opportunity over the next year, as we studied and memorized all of these things for confirmation, to have Alice at my home and for me to visit her family. And when I met her mom for the first time, and then I recognized her because she worked at a local store, a local Kmart. I recognized her, but I never knew who she was until I actually met her. And I saw firsthand what grief can do. At that point in my life, I hadn't encountered it before, but I saw this woman who was very, very gaunt, very thin, very pale, and very expressionless, almost as if there was just nothing there anymore. She was very kind to us. She always would make us lunch when we were there, but she never talked very much to us at all. There was one single picture of their son on top of the television. And I remembered that. I remained friends with Alice for a couple of years afterwards. And then we went off to different high schools. My family moved. I no longer went to that church. But I remembered that woman. And that'll come back a little bit when I'm talking. But anyway, afterwards, I went on and I got a degree in teaching. I got an advanced degree in counseling. And I'm telling you that because that also plays into my story later on. I married my high school sweetheart. He was a military officer. We moved all around the world. We lived in Germany and Belgium. We lived all throughout the United States. When we were in Germany, my daughter was born. She was my first child. And we were very inseparable, like I said. My husband comes from a large family, and so we had wanted to have a large family also. I was excited. I only had one brother and sister, so I was excited to have a large family. But after my daughter was born, I suffered several miscarriages. I suffered 3 miscarriages in a row. One of them was a twin that I had lost it in 2 different months, actually. And I kind of started to realize this dream was not going to happen. And about 4 years later, I gave birth to my son, who we were going to name Kyle. I was excited to name him Kyle. But while I was in the hospital, I realized this is going to be my last child. And so I asked my husband if we could name him Zachary. He was okay with that. He wanted to know why. And I said, because I feel that this is our last child. And so now we have our bookends, A to Z. We have Amber to Zachary. And he thought that was kind of cool. So we named my son Zachary. And we went on as a family of 4 to have a very, very normal life. We had the ups and downs that every family has. We moved around a lot, which was exciting. But it was also difficult for them because they had to say goodbye to friends and things like that. My husband would deploy a lot back in the early days. And so I was a single parent for a lot of it. And, we just went through all of the things that normal families go through. When my daughter was 14 years old, I learned that there was something going on with her. I wasn't sure what it was. I knew that there was, moodiness that came with being a teenage girl, but I knew that it was more. And by the time she was 15 years old, it was very obvious. And I was trying to get help for her that she was suffering from an eating disorder. And I didn't know anything about eating disorders back then. This was 2004, 2005. I couldn't find any books on eating disorders. I talked with doctors about eating disorders. Nobody seemed to know anything. Our insurance wouldn't pay for any of these elite facilities that a lot of people can easily get into now. But back then we dealt with it ourselves. I realized, that Amber was she was always different. She was brilliant girl, funny as all hell. She was just funny, sassy, witty. She could come up with all these great things, very, very kind to people. But she was really deep. She would always ask really deep questions. And I remember maybe a year or so before she died, maybe it was a little bit more, she had come to me and she said that she thought that we were living in a matrix. I wasn't so deep at the time. I told her that she probably shouldn't say things like that because people would think she was weird. And she was trying to explain the movie to me, The Matrix. I hadn't seen it. I wasn't even interested back then in seeing it. And I just said, you just don't, don't be saying things like that. People are going to think you're a little strange. My kids got along marvelously. My son would go along with all of these things, even if he didn't feel the same way. But, her struggles were real. She was, like I said, she was very smart. She was the president of her honor society. She got a full scholarship to the University of Florida. She did all of these things while she was battling this illness that plagued her for 11 years, right up until the day she died. She, when she was in college, she got a scholarship, or not a scholarship, she got awarded an opportunity to have the dream job of her life, which was to go to New York City. She had all this energy and all this ambition, and she wanted to go to New York City, and she wanted to work for Macy's Corporation as a buyer. And she was offered that position. And I was a little worried because I knew she was still struggling, but she was going to different therapy groups and doing the things that she needed to do. But I always knew that, wherever we go, we take all of ourselves with us. And she took all of that with her. And even though this was a really big city, there was very little help for her. Her own primary care doctor didn't even know where to refer her back then. So she had all of these problems. And then one day we couldn't get in touch with her, which was very unusual. We were all getting together for Thanksgiving. We were traveling to Pennsylvania to be with family and friends. And we were actually house sitting for family that was away at the time, but they would be back by Thanksgiving. My husband and I were there alone, and we were trying to contact our daughter, and we couldn't get in touch with her. I was leaving all kinds of messages. And the following day, November 23rd, 2014, we received that telephone call that everybody dreads receiving. And my daughter had overdosed on prescription medication. We were not at our own home. We were at somebody else's home. There wasn't anyone with us. We were alone. And this news just, came over us. This is a holiday week. My God, this can't really be happening. We were standing in the kitchen of my sister-in-law, and there was a large window in the kitchen and a stone wall that my brother-in-law had made right outside of the kitchen window. My husband was holding me because my legs were pretty much giving out underneath me. And my husband took his telephone and he snapped a picture out the kitchen window. I don't know if I was mad that he did that at the time. I didn't understand anything. He said, there's a red-tailed hawk sitting on he showed me the picture, looked out the window. There was a hawk, meant nothing to me. He later explained to me that was extremely unusual behavior. My husband's an outdoorsman. He's always been a hunter. And he said, it's the end of November and there's a hawk. They don't come down like that. It's just sitting and it's looking in the window. And he had this picture to memorialize this. He knew that it meant something, but I don't think he knew what it meant, but he just knew that this was a very strange occurrence and it meant nothing to me at all. Later that same night, this was the first day that we had gotten this news, I was laying in bed and my husband couldn't even come into bed yet. And I was drifting in and out of sleep. I was exhausted because I had spent the entire day and night the day before trying to find my daughter. I was calling hospitals. I was trying to call friends. I was calling anybody that I could think of. So I was really tired and I had fallen asleep, and I was awakened by 3 very distinct knocks that were coming from the ceiling above me. And I sat up in bed and I had a sensation that it was my daughter. I don't know why I thought that, because I didn't know anything about signs at the time, nothing. But I hadn't heard about, I'd heard about mediums, maybe I'd heard about signs, but for some reason I just had it in me that it was her. I just knew it. The next day, I went over to my sister's house. My mother lived with my sister. My husband's family had returned and I couldn't handle all of them being around me. So I went over to my sister's. I'm very close to my sister. My sister's my daughter's godmother. My mother was living there. This is my mother's first grandchild. She was distraught. The 3 of us were together and I was sleeping in the bed with my mom. And in the middle of the night, the exact same thing happened in a different house, and it was just 3 knocks. Never heard anything about it before. I sat up in bed. It did not wake my mother up, just me. I sat up in bed and I acknowledged it. I don't even know why I acknowledged it at the time, but I just said, I know it's you. I know you're okay. And you don't ever need to wake me up like that again. And that was November 24th of 2014. That has never, ever happened again after I acknowledged it. Well, it was Thanksgiving week, so it was an agonizing week for me because she was in a different state. They had to do an autopsy. They had to send her. So it was days before I had an opportunity to see her. But when I did, she looked like my daughter. But I knew that my daughter wasn't there. I kissed her hand, I tickled her arm, and I knew that it wasn't that my daughter was dead inside of that body. She just wasn't there. And I immediately started thinking, well, where are you? I know, there's no way. You cannot take all of that love and kindness and energy and intelligence and humor, and it can't just disappear. So I've got to find out where you are. And there was just never any question that I was going to find out where she was. I just had absolutely no clue how to do it. I knew that there was a medium named John Edward, and I'd seen him on television, but I kind of thought, you either have to get tickets to go and see this person, or you have to have lots of money. I didn't know that there were actual mediums that you could talk to that would be able to give you an independent reading. I had no idea. Yes. I didn't know how to research books because I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know the word afterlife research or anything like that. I would type things in like my daughter died. Now what? Just for anything that would come. And my husband and I stayed at this house with our family, my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law, because we lived quite a distance from everybody. And, one day I was coming into the bathroom at that house and I turned the light on and I saw myself in the mirror in the bathroom. And immediately I saw that mom from 40 years before. I was as white as a ghost. I was losing weight. I didn't have any expression. I was defeated. And I thought, no, there's got to be a way. There's got to be. I knew I didn't want that. I knew my daughter wouldn't want that for me. And I just said to the universe, to God, to anybody, show me the way. Just help me to find her. Show me the way. And when I did that, that was the beginning of 2015. The universe just started dropping people and books and resources and all kinds of things right in my lap. All these things just started coming together, and I wasn't discerning at all. If somebody told me about a medium, I was on the phone making an appointment to go to this medium, knew nothing about, I had no discernment whatsoever. I would never have had somebody come into my house and fix a pipe without me checking them out, but I didn't do that. And I had a lot of disappointments, but slowly over time, people started to teach me things. I started to learn things. I started to learn things in books. And the sign, because I was getting signs all along, and I was writing them down because I didn't want to forget them. And somebody else had said, make sure you write down the date, the time, what was going on. So I started keeping notes on all of this stuff. And these signs really started to validate for me that I was on the right track. My husband was suffering a lot because he was a military officer. He was very black and white thinking. He also had, that feeling, and he explained it to me later, that a father is supposed to be able to protect his children, and I wasn't able to protect her. And I would tell him about some of these things that I was reading, and he would be interested, but then he would just kind of go about his business. But the universe dropped someone right in my lap. And I'm sure that some of you are familiar with Suzanne Giesemann. Suzanne Giesemann is a wonderful evidential medium. She was channeling, and I hadn't heard anything about channeling. So I started watching some things on on her channeling it, I was like, this is absolutely incredible. And I thought, well, my husband can wrap his arms around this because she was a military officer and she's married to a military officer. So this is something that he could. And then I found out that we lived only 2 hours away from Suzanne and her husband, and that she actually channeled up in the villages where she lived at the time. And I said, we are going to see Suzanne Giesemann. And so we went, and my husband had an opportunity to talk to Suzanne's husband and said, these people are the real deal. This is real. And I'm like, I know, this is real, right? Well, I was reading a book that Suzanne had written, and I brought this, my husband at the time, like I said, black and white thinking, very scientific, everything. And I wanted to read a passage to him from one of the books about when Suzanne was at a hotel, and all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, her television turned on and off by itself. And as I was reading the passage to my husband, the exact same thing happened to us. We were sitting in the living room and the exact same thing happened. And he just looked at me and I'm like, look, I didn't do anything. This is crazy. This is really crazy. So he started to come on board. And I said, let's have a reading with Suzanne. We hadn't told her anything about our situation or anything like that. I said, let's have a reading. But then I saw that her waiting list was several years long, but I put my name on the waiting list. And one day I was sick in bed just a couple months later, and I saw that there was a call that came into my phone. I didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number, but then the same call came in right again afterward. And this time they left a message. I thought, okay, I'll check it out. And all I heard was, Lisa, this is Suzanne Giesemann. It's really me. Please don't hang up. She said, I just wanted to tell you that for some reason, Spirit is telling me I need to move you up on my list and I need to talk with you. So I immediately called her back and I set up this appointment for us. My husband's in a different state, so we were doing a Zoom meeting, all three of us. And she gave us just a beautiful evidential reading, and I could tell my husband was pretty impressed with the reading. And then coming toward the end, she said, and your daughter had such an affinity for frogs. I can see all the frogs. And I said, no, my daughter was real girly girl, nothing about frogs. And she said, no, I'm not seeing real frogs, but I could see her stuffed frogs, and there's a frog bench, and there's a frog sitting on the windowsill and all these. And I said, absolutely, that's not her. And so she got quiet for a second and she said, I can't take that back because that's what I'm seeing. You said your daughter didn't live with you. Maybe that's a joke that she and her friends would have. And I thought, oh, maybe. Okay. She said, just check with them because there's definitely something here with all of these frogs. So we finished the reading, which other than the frogs was a very wonderful reading. And I started contacting friends and everybody said, no. I said, did she have anything like that in her apartment that's new? No. And I thought, well, that's really weird that happened. Well, the very next day, Suzanne contacted me and she said, stop the search for the frogs. You had an interloper. I said, an interloper? What is that? And she said, it was actually a message for someone else. Someone else had asked their loved one on the other side to come through on his first anniversary in spirit. And that happened to be yesterday. Well, you were the reading I did yesterday, not her. And I still didn't understand. And she said, they called him Froggy. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, I know who it's for. She had told me that she had asked him to come through her. So I thought that was pretty cool. And that was in the summer of 2018. Now, fast forward to March of 2019, and I'm reading my weekly Zamet report. I'm going through all my articles, and I love to watch the videos. This is one of the best resources that I found early on. And I start watching a video with this woman who was studying under Suzanne Giesemann. She was studying to become a medium. And she had apparently developed all of these mediumship abilities in a very short time. And my monkey mind said, that's bull. You can't develop that quickly. So I stopped it and I started going through the rest of the Zammit report. And somewhere in one of the things I was reading or one of the videos I was watching, I got a download that I was supposed to go back and watch this video. So I went back. This is March of 2019, 8 months after my reading with Suzanne Giesemann. And I'm watching it, and I thought I was going to fall off my chair. Because this was Cheryl Page, who is one of the women who has a group on here. And I'm hearing her talk about her fiance, and that they called him Froggy, and that he's been gone for almost 2 years. And I thought, oh my God, this is this woman. And this is my nature. I started looking her up on Facebook. I found her. I wrote to her and I said, please don't think I'm crazy. This is serious. Did your fiance die in July of 2017? And she called me within minutes. And she said, you were the woman. I said, I was the woman that Froggy came into my reading. Well, Cheryl and I became friends after that. I found out at the time that Cheryl was moving about 2 hours away from me. She's been to my home. I was supposed to meet Cheryl because later that year, my daughter came to Cheryl and to Suzanne in 2 different states at the same exact time in the morning while I was at a conference with the exact same message. Suzanne Giesemann was at that conference. Cheryl was not at that conference, but this was so unbelievably validating to me. And it was so unbelievably validating to Suzanne that Suzanne ended up changing her entire workshop that she was doing at the conference based on the message that Amber brought to her, that story is in my book. It had to do with making Suzanne look at the carpet in her hotel room and giving her all of these ideas about interconnectedness, the web of interconnectedness. It was just unbelievable. So those were a couple of the signs that we had. I told you my husband has had all these signs with hawks. He's had a hawk almost take the top of his head off in our driveway, and he couldn't believe that it came down so close. He's had a hawk follow him from lamppost to lamppost on a walk. And he tells me these stories all the time, and it brings him just so much comfort because he truly believes that his daughter is putting these hawks in his path, letting him know, that she's with him all the time. It's just not something she does for me. And I was hoping to get that validated for him at some point. I forget what year this was. I think it might have also been 2018, because I know that it was before the pandemic. We went to a gallery reading with Maureen Hancock, who is a very well-known medium. She's world-known, but she's very well-known in the New England area. And she works with police and things like that. She's a really great medium. And we went to this gallery reading. I think it was maybe only the second gallery reading my husband had ever gone to. And he felt so strongly that there was a message for him. So we went and we sat there, and it was amazing. The evidence that she gave to people was just absolutely incredible. But we didn't have a reading. But it was fine. We were happy. We could just see the comfort and the consolation that some people had. And I had bought her book. I think it was The Medium Next Door or something like that. And I wanted her to sign it. I had signed up for that extra little $10 thing that you could get your book and get it signed. And so my husband and I waited in line for Maureen to sign our book, and handed a phone to somebody behind us to take our picture with Maureen. And she turned around to sign her book. And then she turned around. She took my husband by the shoulders. She looked into his eyes and she said, it's her every time you see a hawk. And my 250-pound husband stood there with tears rolling down his face. And he just looked at me and he said, that's all I needed. We went to a conference later. My husband, he expects me to read all of the books and then tell him about them. He's not really into the sitting down and reading of the books. He has a whole lot of other things that he reads. Sometimes he will. But one book that he read that he absolutely loved was Brian Weiss's Many Lives, Many Masters. He had never encountered the topics before. He felt just so convinced. And he said, this is somebody that I would love to meet someday. I'd love to sit down and pick this man's brain. Well, I didn't see anything that Brian Weiss was doing, but we did go to a conference in Miami to see the medium Laura Lynn Jackson, who wrote The Light Between Us. I had received that book from a very, very good friend of my daughter's. Shortly after she died, I didn't know this girl at all. She said that something told her to send it to me. And she said, I'm not in the habit of doing this, but I hope that you'll find some comfort in this book. I read it. I bought one for my mom, and I hope that it's okay that I sent this to you. Well, this wonderful woman who worked with my daughter in New York City, I've come to know her very, very well. And she has always had incredible intuitive abilities. She said that she feels that this opportunity that came to her after my daughter died was for her to stop doing what she was doing in New York and to study mediumship. She's been studying mediumship for years and years now. She's studied under Nicole Nicole Jansen. She has been to the Netherlands. She's done all these kinds of things. This is what she does now. And so she had given me this book, and we went to see Laura Lynn down in Miami. And my husband did receive an absolutely wonderful reading that showed my daughter's humor, because Laura Lynn said, I'm sorry to do this, but your daughter wants me to make fun of your shoes. She said, who wears shoes like this? They were perfectly normal shoes, but that is exactly what my daughter would do. And she danced around. She said, I'm supposed to dance around. I'm making this great big A for you. And, it was just a wonderful evidential reading. And then it was time for an intermission. And she said, I want to introduce you to somebody who's here, not to present to you, but who's just here to enjoy this like you. And she referred to the back row. And sitting in the back row was Brian Weiss and his daughter. My husband almost fell off of his chair again. He's like, did you know this? I said, I don't think anybody knew this. And he said, I'm going to talk to him. And he started talking to Brian Weiss, and he was just so excited about it. And he and Brian Weiss walked outside in the heat of Miami to sit around the pool outside and have a drink. And there on the lamppost right in front of the pool was a hawk, a red-tailed hawk. And my husband brought it to Brian's attention and said, this is my sign. This is what happens. It just happens over and over and over. And like I said earlier, if anybody had told me, I understand why people sometimes keep these things inside of them, because it makes you feel like you're cracking up a little bit. Like in my BA days before Amber died, I don't know that I would have believed anything like this, but this stuff just happens and happens and happens. I'll just tell you a couple more things, and then I'm going to go on and talk about the book, because this is a good one, Wendy. This is a good one. In 2018, my husband and I were preparing to go out to Arizona for the Afterlife Research and Education Institute Symposium, the AREI Symposium that used to be in person before the pandemic out in Arizona. We were very excited about it because it was more than just mediums. There was all kinds of things that my husband agreed to go because he could just wrap his mind around a lot of these things. And in 2017, several months before the symposium, I was reading the Zammert report again, and I saw that Dr. Craig Hogan had put something on there for any parents who might be going to the symposium the following year, if they would be interested in doing a little research or a little experiment with this little Brazilian woman who was coming up to talk about instrumental transcommunication. I had no idea what that was, but I was game for anything. I was signing up for things left and right. So I decided, I didn't even ask my husband about it. I decided all she wants is one photo and just, who is this person? That's all I had to tell her. And this is when out there I met my wonderful friend who has become such a great friend to me, Sonia Rinaldi. And for anyone who's not familiar with instrumental transcommunication, it is just the use of electronic devices to communicate with us, either through voice or through image. Sonia used to do a lot of things with voice, and at the time in 2018, she really was still doing a lot. She kind of transitioned more into images when she started receiving many, many images. But through my 6.5 years that I worked daily with Sonia, helping her to disseminate her work, helping her to edit everything into really good English and getting it out there to as many people as I could, helping to establish her Patreonship, because at the very beginning of the pandemic, there was no more traveling and she wasn't going to be able to go to any of these places where she could share her work. I kind of became her right arm, and I learned so much through her. Terry was saying earlier, because she had an opportunity to see her son, I have seen miraculous things through her work. And I know her heart. I know that her heart is only about bringing peace and comfort to those that are left behind here when someone dies. I've also seen guides. I've seen ultra terrestrials. I've seen all kinds of images of individuals who either are known to us that we've loved, or those who want to share the cosmic love with us, or cosmic messages. And I have seen my own daughter wink her eye at me when I, unbeknownst to Sonia, had asked her to wink at me. I have seen her blow me a kiss in video. I have seen, and Sonia said she's never seen it before, one lone teardrop coming down her cheek. And Sonia said, I've never seen anyone sad. And I said, that's not what I'm taking from it. Amber and I laughed until we cried. That is so evidential to me, because she doesn't look sad at all. That is very, very evidential to me. And I got one audio message, and it came on my anniversary. And Sonia apologized because it wasn't a happy anniversary message. It wasn't anything. All she said was party in the woods, party in the woods. And I got married at the Woodlands. So that was very evidential for me also, because we had a party in the woods. You know, I've met so many amazing mediums. I've met so many amazing healers. I've gotten to talk with my daughter. My daughter actually, and I don't know anyone else, I know of people, but my daughter actually materialized in a seance, talked to me, sang with me, kissed me, and there were people all around me. Sonia was right beside me when that happened. And I had someone that I could talk with about it afterwards. And I actually got to see her on the other side one time. In June of 2020, I sat in the power, which I've done many, many times without any real effects other than some relaxation. I sat in the power with Scott Milligan, and I had the opportunity to see my daughter, to see where she lives now, to see 3 other children, and for my daughter to tell me, you always thought that there were 4, Mom. There were only 3. And those are the ones that I lost. So all of these people, all of these, perspectives, everything that they brought to me, and all these notes that I kept, I decided, well, I need to do something with this. I'd already been volunteering with Sonia. I was a caring listener for Helping Parents Heal, which is a wonderful organization for people whose children have died. And a caring listener is someone who just receives phone calls, not necessarily from someone whose child just died, but from someone who's just having a really bad day. And we take those calls day or night whenever they come. And I always enjoyed that. It's helped me probably more than it's helped the people that I've talked with, because it gives me an opportunity to remember where I was and where I've come from. And I've transformed just really incredibly over the years. I've realized through my service with Helping Parents Heal that this is what I want to do. I want to be there to help other people on their grief journeys. And of course, when I made that decision, the opportunity presented itself for me, because the world-renowned grief expert, David Kessler, was doing at that very time a 12-week course in grief educator certification. And I thought, well, this is something I really need to do. Remember, I told you I have a master's degree in counseling, and we had nothing. We didn't talk at all. And if we did talk about the grief from the death of a loved one, it was always about helping people get through it, helping people get through it. And I realized that, we don't get through it. We don't get over it. We walk with it. And anyone who's had a child, a spouse, a sibling, a very dear friend die knows that you never get over it. You never get through it. It's always a part of you. It's always a part of you. And my husband said, "Are you sure you want to talk about this today?" And I thought, well, there's nothing more that I would want to talk about today. I love football, but I would rather be here doing this. This morning I got up and I wanted to put Amber's photo onto my social media, which I do every year. I encourage people, we usually come up with something different most years, although we kind of do the eating disorders awareness most years. But when I went onto my Facebook, the very first thing in my thread was from something called Higher Perspectives. It's not a group. It said follow if I wanted to follow them. But I had never followed them before. I'd never even heard of them. I don't know if anybody else did. But if I can just take this and just read it to you, because I thought this must be what they do every day. There must be something every day. And it says November 23rd, 2025, the perspective of the day. Sometimes the person you need to talk to the most is in heaven. Take comfort in knowing that they're watching over you, protecting you and guiding you from above. Their spirit lives on in your memories, in the love you shared, and in the lessons they taught you. Find solace in talking to them in your prayers, in quiet moments of reflection, or even just speaking your thoughts out loud. Remember, they're never truly gone as long as they remain in your heart. Cherish the moments you had together and honor their memory by living a fulfilling life that would make them proud. Trust that their presence is always with you, offering comfort and guidance when you need it the most. You are never alone. Well, I had to go to that website because I thought they've got to be putting something like that on there every day. And that's not what they're doing every day. There's memes on there. I saw that they were talking about forgiveness the other day, but they didn't have that. And I thought, that is my sign for today. I had asked for a sign, and it came in a message from a social media page that I don't even belong to. So that was the very first thing. I knew when I saw that David was doing this course that I had to take this course because this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to help people. And through that course, I started reflecting for myself on what kinds of things helped me after Amber died. What kind of things did people say that helped me? What kind of things didn't help at all? What kind of things actually kind of hurt? Like when somebody doesn't even acknowledge that this has happened, when their discomfort takes precedence over what's happened to you and they don't have anything to say about it, that really hurt. I just started thinking about all these things. And then I thought about all these notes that I have, these journals, pieces of paper stuck in the journals because I didn't have a journal with me when a sign came about and I just had to find anything and I just, shoved it in there. And I decided that in addition to taking this course, in addition to letting people know that this is what I wanted to do, I wanted to help them. I wanted to talk to them, write to them, help them in any way that I could on their journey, even if it was just helping them to figure out what's the next step. It's not something that I'm getting paid for or anything like that. It's just how I want to honor my daughter for the rest of my life. This is what I want to do. I remember before I even found Helping Parents Heal, I was at a Compassionate Friends meeting one night. And for anybody who's familiar with Tom Zuba, he was our guest speaker that night. Tom is, he's also a grief educator. He had a family of 5, he and his wife, and their 2 sons and their infant daughter. And Tom, in a very short period of time, Tom's wife, his infant daughter and one of his sons all died at different times. And it was just him and his one son left. And he said something to me at that meeting that stuck with me. And it has become a mantra for me. And I've never seen Tom since then. But he said, if I can't talk to you about my children on the other side, that's all I need to know about you. That's all I need to know about you. And I realized how much of my time I had spent trying to make other people comfortable, or if not make them comfortable, at the very least, not make them uncomfortable. And then I stopped caring about that because I thought, this is my child. My child was in my life physically for 25 years, and she's been more of a daily occurrence in my life for the last 11. So I am going to talk about her. I am going to share how I have navigated this grief journey and what I've learned on this grief journey. And I am going to write a book about my transformation, the things that I found to be helpful and not helpful. I'm going to talk about those things that I didn't know early on. How do you find a medium? If you find a medium, what do you do? When you sit down with a medium, what do you do? What don't you do? If you want to walk away believing that the medium was actually a liaison between you and your loved one on the other side, what should you do and what shouldn't you do? And I wanted to talk about what did I come to find out was true for me. And I think that what I've learned for myself is that it is all about love. I thought I was such a lover. You know, I love my family. I love my friends. I was so judgmental. And I am the first one to admit it. My love for many people was very conditional, but because I thought I was right. I thought I was right and they were wrong about something. So I had to, make sure that they understood how to get it right. Wow. I learned a lot about love. And I've learned that really that's all there is. And I've learned that, forgiveness is something that I do for me, because all the things that I haven't forgiven, the people that I haven't forgiven, they're still right here. They don't know it. But I was able to move on when I did that, when I just in my mind, I didn't have to go to people and say, oh, remember when you blah, blah, blah? I forgive you. Just did it myself. And I just let them leave my mind. And that has been helpful to me, very helpful to me, because I've come to learn that I'm not right about all these things that I thought I was right about. But I've also learned that it's really, really important while we're here to serve in some capacity. And for the longest time, I thought that I was a good server too. I always bought the Thanksgiving dinner for the family that couldn't afford it at Thanksgiving. I always donated my things, my children's clothes. I always did those kinds of things, but I didn't do the messy kind of serving. And I think that there's a lot of growth in the messy kind of serving even when you just don't want to, when you're just tired. All the years that I worked for Sonia, I didn't take anything from her. I wanted this to be her mission. I wanted it to be out there. And now I want to be there for parents, for spouses. I held on to my book and I didn't release it. It was finished in July, but I decided to hold on to it and have it published on my daughter's 36th birthday, which was September 7th. I thought this will be a great way to honor her for her birthday. And in typical Amber fashion, 3 days after the book was published on September 10th, I was taking a shower and I, in my mind, asked her if she was proud of me for releasing the book in her honor. And the download that I got was so from Amber, because it wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was, I'm so proud of you, Mom. Like, you did it. That's not what I got. I got a download from her that's not really what she wanted. And in my mind, and I know it was her, because this was not my thoughts. This is not what I wanted. I didn't want to write the first book. Why, if I wanted to write a book, why would I have waited almost 11 years to write it? Especially when I had it all written. A medium had said to me one time, your book is written. You just have to put it on paper now. I thought, okay, I've checked the box. I've written the book. And she said, that's not what I wanted, because they can think you're crazy. These things that you're talking about that I have done, you're just one person. I wanted you to collect them from lots of people. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. This is not what I want to do. And she even gave me the title that it's God Winks and Hearts Heal. And it's collective stories of signs and synchronicities from our loved ones on the other side. Subtitle mine, title hers. And she wanted, and I also got from her that she wanted me to collect them. And she wanted me to just put a first name and a location, because she wanted people to see that these signs and synchronicities are happening everywhere. And I thought, everyone knows this now because I know it. So of course everyone knows it, right? Well, they don't know it. I have heard from so many people telling me I have never told this to anyone, not even somebody in my family. And it goes exactly with what I was thinking, that people, we hold on to them sometimes because we don't want to put ourselves in that vulnerable position and say, like, this happened and I think it was my loved one. Or tell that story to somebody and have them poo-poo it, that, oh, it was just a coincidence or something like that. So many people hold on to them. And it was hard for me because I had dozens and dozens and dozens of things. And I very consciously made my book small. I went through all of my journals, but I didn't include, because I thought, well, people don't need to read about everything that she has done. And I remembered after my daughter died, when I finally found the first book for me to read, I started reading it and I was very interested. I think it was a George Anderson book. I was very interested and I got about halfway through it and I heard about another book. And so I immediately went and got that book and I couldn't contain myself. So I started reading it. And then when I tried to go back to the first one, I couldn't remember what I had read because I had grief brain. So I would go back, a chapter, and I would read it. And it was like I never read it before. So I thought, I want to write a book that can be read in a sitting, that's not heavy. I'm going to just pick a little bit of signs from, different kinds of things, some electrical things, some writings that she's done, those kinds of things, and share them, and then just talk about the transformation. And I said to her while I was in the shower that day, if you had told me this before, I would have put it in the book for people to send signs to me, to send synchronicities. And her message was more like, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. So from there, I started the website. On the website, I asked people to send their signs and synchronicities. I'm getting them from, I think the youngest that I have is from a 17-year-old young man. And I have one from an 80-some-year-old man in the UK who has been receiving signs from his partner for the last 30 years and couldn't wait to share a lot of them with me. So that's what I'm doing now. God Winks and Amber Waves, which is a mother's transformative journey through grief, love, and purpose, came out in September. And very shortly after it came out, within about a week or so, I started collecting stories for the next one, which will be God Winks and Hearts Heal. And I'm hoping to share, with the world, other people's signs. And, I've even told a couple of people that are kind of uncomfortable putting their story out there. You want to change your first name, change your first name. That's fine. We'll just, as long as we can use your location or some location close to you, so that people can see that these are not coming. Just like I thought, John Edward was the only medium. I didn't know that there were more mediums. I didn't know that mediums went from absolutely fraudulent to knock your socks off. I had no idea. So I want to share these stories. And I especially am grateful to talk with people now that the holidays are here, because this is an excruciating time for some people. It is so in your face, the festivities and the celebrations and the commercials with all of the families sitting together. The joy is in your face. And this is a very, very difficult time for lots and lots of people. And I just thought, this is an excellent time to get all of this going. The last thing that I will talk about, and I touch on it a little bit in the book, but I have just been pondering this so much lately, And every day I feel like, I really feel like my daughter must have led me to this, because new discoveries are coming to me every day. And it is birth and death. And I talk in the book, and I know that this is an area in my book that a lot of people disagree with, and that's perfectly fine. I'm speaking about what works for me. I don't use the words passed on. I don't say I've lost my daughter. I don't say my daughter has transcended. I don't say those kinds of things. It works for me. I say that she died. And I've said that many times here. And I no longer think of birth and death as opposites or doors on different, on different ends. I started thinking about them so very, very similarly, actually, in the sense that, birth is an anticipatory thing. People are very often, excited about it. It can be long. It can be very, very sudden. It can be painful. People tend to celebrate. People tend to, I call it love's arrival. People are getting so excited about love's arrival. And the incredible thing about after having a baby, especially if you're one of the first in your group to have a baby, is that after that baby comes, you don't have a whole lot in common with a lot of your friends that don't have babies. And you kind of start to find a new tribe of people. They teach you things that you didn't know. You go and do things with them because the other ones are out and they're clubbing or they're doing whatever they did, whatever you did before. It's not that they're not a part of your life. It's not that you don't wish them well. It's just that, you need to find that new tribe because that's how you grow as a parent. And I just started thinking, death is the exact same thing. It's not the opposite. It's part of the continuum. Some people get the opportunity to anticipate it because someone is dying slowly. For other people like me, it's a very, very sudden change. For some people, the period leading up to the death can be painful. The death itself is not painful at all. But what we are saying goodbye to here is a big celebration on the other side. Probably just as when that baby came into existence here again, it was probably a little bit of saying goodbye on the other side. See you soon. And that's where I've come. I know that my daughter is several steps ahead on this path. She is holding space for us. But I also found that after someone that you love dies, we tend to isolate a lot. And what has been helpful is finding a new tribe. Finding a new tribe of people who've also been through this, who speak that new language. Because as much as our loved ones, our friends, our family want to help, a lot of the things that they do for anyone who's been through this before isn't really helpful. It's helpful to grow from the experiences of those who've been down there. I think when I talked to Gary's group, one of the things that I said is, to me, and this is, because my daughter was in the rooms of recovery, if you walk into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, it's not very helpful to go and stand over in the corner with the other person who's having a cigarette because you want one so bad because they just had a drink that morning. There's some camaraderie there, but there's no healing. The healing is in the people who are standing up in the front of the room with 20 years behind them laughing. That's what you want. And, that's where Helping Parents Heal helped me. That's where other parents who have been on this road have helped me. And that's what I want to do. I want to be able to help those people survive and thrive. And all of these people who have helped me so much on this journey. The Zamet Report was a phenomenal resource for me and continues to be every single week. My friend Sandra Champlain has been remarkably helpful to me, and her book has been remarkably helpful. Sherry is here today. Sherry's been a wonderful friend on this journey. So there's so many people, and I'm hoping to include my name amongst those people someday with a different kind of healing and help, but to help people to go from that old learning to some new learning, because Like I said at the very beginning, if anybody had ever told me that I would change in the ways that I've changed, I wouldn't have believed them. But I think that the universe, when I said that I was ready to change, the universe has put everything in place for me to do that. And I'm hoping that I can do that for somebody else. And that's about all I've got for y'all.